Medie, thank you so much for joining us today to talk about your new book, His Only Wife.
Thank you so much for having me, Kathy.
Yes, we're thrilled to have you. I wanted to congratulate you on your book and just say a little bit about it. It's the story of Afi, is the main character, a young woman from Ghana, lives in a village, and our marriage is arranged for her with a lot of interesting consequences. Can you fill us in a little more about it for those who haven't read it yet?
Yes, so Afi is a young woman in Ho, is a town in Ghana, and she finds herself in an arranged marriage to a wealthy man, and his name is Ellie. And this is a marriage that has been arranged by Ellie's mother, Auntie. And Auntie has arranged this marriage for several reasons, but the main reason being that she does not approve of Ellie's current partner. And so Afi has been brought in to basically bring Ellie closer to his family, bring him back to his family. And so on one level, the story is about how Afi goes about this task that she's been given. And we get to see whether or not she succeeds in bringing Ellie back to his family. But on another level, it is a story about a young woman who is trying to make a path for herself in the world and who is trying to speak up and to demand the things that she wants from life.
An arranged marriage feels to modern women as something that's so foreign, and I don't mean it happens in Africa foreign, but just something you can't wrap your head around undergoing.
So I should say that arranged marriages are really not common in Ghana. So personally, I don't know anyone in my generation or even in my parents' generation who's in an arranged marriage. Now, this doesn't mean that it doesn't happen in Ghana. I mean, it's probably more common among some communities than others. But just to say that even Ghanaians reading this book are going to be like, interesting. And they're going to have similar reactions to people from other places in the world, because a lot of Ghanaians like me just do not know people in arranged marriages. A lot of this is me just imagining how an arranged marriage would happen and how someone would respond to it.
So what made you decide to put Afi in that situation?
I was thinking about Auntie, who is Afi's mother-in-law, and a lot of this is Auntie meddling in her son's life. And I think I was thinking, what is the most intrusive thing that a mother could do to her child? And an arranged marriage was like high on the list. She will try to orchestrate a relationship. And in some ways, if you think about it, it's not really unusual, because, I mean, there are a lot of parents who try to dictate their relationship of their children, right? And you see this everywhere, where, I mean, to varying degrees, where parents disapprove of one partner or approve. And so I think I just took this to the most extreme and said, what can a parent do to really interfere in his child or her child's relationship? And I think that is where this arranged marriage plot line comes from.
You have another book you published this year. It's, I think, more academic, perhaps, Global Norms and Local Action, the Campaign to End Violence Against Women in Africa. So obviously the lives of women in Africa is a big part of your work.
Yeah, and I'm just really interested in understanding various aspects of women's lives. There's so much that has not been written about. There's so much that hasn't been explored in fiction, but also in nonfiction, right? So I'm currently working on a new project on women traditional leaders. And a lot of countries in Africa have a rich tradition of women playing roles within communities. There are women chiefs in Ghana, there are women queen mothers. But often when we think about leadership, we don't count these women, especially in a lot of the work that has been done. These women are often not studied, and that kind of drives my interest. But I'm also very much interested in the day-to-day, the mundane. I want to read more fiction where women in Africa just do regular things. And it's not always about great human suffering, although that's also very important. But the everyday, the day to day, which is kind of what this book is about. Afi gets to fall in love and to worry about her parents and about her career and about her family. And for me, that in itself is just really interesting. And I think that women in Africa, women in Ghana, women in Africa more broadly, just do not get enough of that attention. I think that drives both my nonfiction and my fiction. This interest in looking at things that often don't get attention. So from the very beginning, I knew that I wanted to write a story about a young woman who was kind of facing a lot of social pressure and responding to that pressure. And I mean, it took me a while to get to the stage where I knew how she was going to react to the pressure, but I always knew that there was going to be that clash and that tension within the story. And I also wanted it to be a story about growth, about progress, because as people, we constantly change and we constantly grow. And I feel it's a character who is a bit, they're parts of a story that are almost frustrating in that her path to growth and self-development is not a very linear path, in that there are a lot of twists and turns, and there are a lot of places where you think, oh my goodness, why are you doing this? But for me, that is what it is to be human, right? I mean, I think there are very few people who face very difficult circumstances and are just able to do what they think is right and to do it straight away. A lot of us, there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of, take one step forward, two steps back before we get to a place where we can assert ourselves. And I really wanted to show this in the book. So I didn't know from the beginning that there was going to be this kind of a plot, although the ending was a bit of a surprise to me because I did have a different ending in mind. But as I got to know Afi more, and as she developed on the page, the ending that I had in mind just wasn't appropriate. It just seemed out of character for her.
Don't you love it when you're writing and that the character sort of asserts themselves into it and says, nope, that's not the way I go. I go this way.
Absolutely. And it's one of the reasons why I enjoy writing.
Well, his only wife, Afi, is in this arranged marriage with Ellie, who has another love interest, another woman. And is that a common thing, an accepted sort of thing in the cultures you're writing about?
I mean, men do have affairs, and I also hear that women also have because there are always conversations around extramarital affairs in Ghana. And people like to point out to me that, well, it's not only men who have extramarital affairs, women also have extramarital affairs. So yeah, I think it's important to put it out there. Yeah, it does happen. And I think there are various levels of acceptance. I mean, there might be situations where people are like, it's so common that as a woman, you just learn to live with it, or as a man, you just learn to live with it. Or maybe some people decide to leave these relationships. I have heard stories about, I usually hear stories about people who stay in these relationships, even though they are unhappy about it. So I should say, I think the better answer to the question is that it's not the case that people are accepting of extramarital affairs. From all of the stories that I hear, people are not happy about it to be in these situations. But then it's whether or not people leave these relationships or if they learn to live with it.
I was thinking there's one line where the attitudes of men, and this could be here too, we're talking to Ellie, and Afi overhears them, but they don't know she's there. And one of them says, "You're a lion. You should have an entire pride," meaning of women. Is that something that you've how did you come about with that sort of line of thought that men might be saying that privately?
There's an extent to which there are people who think of women as like kind of a prize, and we see this everywhere, where men want the most glamorous woman, uh, and on their arm to kind of an accomplishment. Some people see it as an accomplishment, and I get the sense that, or I've gotten the sense over time that this is something that exists within Ghana as well, and not to say every man thinks in this way, but where there's the attitude that you need to get like the most beautiful, glamorous woman, and in some way that um, reinforces your masculinity. It shows that you are a man and you should be respected. But then also, the more of such beautiful and glamorous women that you have, the more that you are a man. So I think it's partly an issue, and well, it's a problem of how we think about masculinity, or how we've brought up young boys up, or how we bring up boys and men, but even women, to think about masculinity and what it means to be a man, right? So you have, having a woman on your arm, beautiful woman, but often multiple women as kind of a sign of your masculinity. Money is also very important, where the message is that to be a man is to have money and is to have wealth, right? So you accumulate the wealth and you accumulate the beautiful women, and then you can then prove to yourself, because oftentimes I think a lot of this is internal, is people feeling that for me to really be a man, I need to do A, B, and C. And so I think that is where these attitudes come from. So, I mean, that is not a line, that specific line is not a line that I've heard anyone say, but from some of my observations, it feels like that's how a lot of people think, especially men, think about what it means to be a man. And I think I can see parallels all over the world in what it is that men want, and what they think they need to do in order to be seen as men.
That's definitely true. Yeah, seen everywhere. When Afi first is moved to Accra after her marriage, her wedding to Ellie, that he's not there for, by the way, so not too many spoilers here, but it's a really interesting situation because it is all arranged by the family, and you kind of see this world that's whirring around her. But when she first moves to Accra, she kind of has this view of she would be, her duties as a wife will be largely domestic, but that kind of changes pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it does. And I mean, is it, to an extent, maybe it's not entirely her view, but the view of her mother and of her in-laws, because she's getting this message that this man is a prize. And if you want to keep this prize, you have to make him happy. And to make him happy, you have to be a good wife. And this is what it means to be a good wife, right? Where you're constantly in service to this man in order to please him and to keep him. And so it's cooking, it's cleaning, it's being always beautiful and looking great, so that when he comes, he appreciates all of that. And I think, and yes, so the story really is about the tensions between this and what she might want for herself.
And somebody who mirrors that in the book is the character of Evelyn.
Yes, so Evelyn is Afi's neighbor in Accra, and Evelyn is also Ellie's brother's girlfriend. So they are connected in two ways. But she's also my favorite character in the book, even though I do love Afi, because yes, she doesn't do that. She doesn't play the domestic game. She doesn't aim to please. And of course, she suffers for it, and she pays a very harsh price for being a woman who says, I will do what I want. But at the same time, she's able to live life on her own terms. And I think a big part of this is that the idea, and this is what the message that Afi gets from the people around her, that you have to perform these roles in order to win this man, right? So, and so the man is like always dangling in front of her like this prize, and she always has to do these things in the hopes that she's going to get the man. But I think an important and we see this in many places where women are told that you need to look this way and you need to behave this way, and if you do these things, then you're going to get the man as a prize. And it's problematic in many ways, in that we set up men as, this great award of some sort that someone is winning, as opposed to equals being in a loving relationship. We are constantly telling women often that, or not we, but maybe, I mean, the media, the messages that people get is that you are working towards like pleasing a man, and if you please him, then you win, as opposed to telling both men and women that you are equals in a relationship, and the relationship should be based on the things that you care about and the fact that you care about each other and you make each other happy. Most people want that out of life. Most people, and it doesn't matter whether someone is like highly educated or not, or if they live in a rural or an urban area. I think that as people, we naturally want to be treated well. We want our views to matter. We want to attain our dreams. And for that, and because of that, I just wanted to write a character that reflected this reality. And Afi is, she doesn't make it to the university, even though she wanted to. And she doesn't come from a well-off family. But at the same time, she wanted more out of life. And even though she doesn't use the language of feminism in any way, a lot of what she's trying to do is very feminist. And she doesn't use this language because I didn't want to impose this language on her. And I didn't want to impose these viewpoints on her. I just really wanted it. I asked myself, how would someone who hasn't spent years thinking about gender or years thinking about feminism and equality, how would someone like that behave in this situation? And basically, Afi is what I came up with.
And that's great. I mean, that's what we bring to it too. We as readers, you'll bring that to it and kind of see how her journey is a pretty typical journey for a lot of women worldwide, really. I mean, not untypical. In fact, I was reading something about in this pandemic, and this is in the United States, this was in the New York Times, how so many women have had to leave their jobs because of the schooling at home. Mm-hmm. It's not the men leaving jobs so much, but it's the women. So, as much as we may think we've passed all of that, it tends to fall heavily on the women still, even in, in this country and everywhere.
Absolutely. It does. I mean, although things are changing, women continue to be responsible for most of what happens within the home. It makes sense that when such things happen, it's women who suffer in the workforce, and women who are pushed into the home. And I think in a lot of places, including Ghana, there really isn't, the state does not provide sufficient support for women, such that it's very easy to fall out of the workforce, or to just have to do so much. I mean, something that I hear a lot when people talk about working women in Ghana is how, even though increasingly women are very much present and represented in the formal sector, so where women have, corporate jobs, women have regular office jobs, the expectation is still that they are going to do everything in the home and at the same time have these corporate jobs or whatever else that keeps them out of the home for long hours. So if you think about it, it's like women now have 2 full-time jobs, managing the home and then managing whatever happens in the office. Both the man and the woman are going to go to work in the morning, work these very long hours, but they're expected when they come home, it's expected that a woman, and I mean, this is not in all relationships, but I think in many relationships, a lot of relationships, it's expected that a woman is also going to make sure there's food on the table, and she's the only one supposed to do this. This burden rarely falls on men, that she will take care of the children if they are children and whatever else needs to be done in the household. So at the end of the day, women have two full-time jobs, and it's rarely acknowledged, and we don't see a lot of work on the part of the state to deal with this. We don't see paternity leave being an important policy that's being introduced, or if there's paternity leave in many countries, it's very short. And yes, just there just isn't enough that is done to support women in the workforce. And for that reason, when you have things like this pandemic, we then see women maybe being pushed back into the home, or having to lose on gains that they've made within the workforce.
So how does your research that you're doing academically, can you tell us just a little bit more about it?
So my book is Global Norms and Local Action, the campaign to end violence against women in Africa. And it's a study of post-conflict states' response to violence against women. Specifically, I look at Liberia and Cote d'Ivoire, and I look at policing, at the creation of specialized police stations. So that would be familiar to many people. They resemble the law and order special victims units. But a big part of this work was talking to survivors of violence and trying to understand their experience, but also how they engage with the police and with the court. So basically with the criminal justice system. So women would often talk about being like wanting to leave an abusive relationship, but not leaving because a friend or a relative told them not to do it. And so this is where my fiction comes in that I'm really interested in how social forces shape the things that women do. And so and that is, I think, why I put Afi in this situation where she's subject to a lot of social pressure from relatives and from friends, from her in-laws, and that is what a lot of people experience in life, especially if you live in a close-knit community. If you live in a community in which the ties between people are strong, this is more likely to happen. And this is what I wanted to explore in the book. So that is how like my nonfiction and my fiction is connected in this case.
When you were talking about your studies that you did in interviewing these women, were those difficult conversations?
They were very difficult conversations. And I remember as a student many years ago, beginning my research, and a big part of it was, why is it that people weren't going to the police? And why even though people were experiencing really terrible things, they weren't willing to report to the police. But after spending years researching this, I began thinking, why do people go to the police? Because when I would speak to women who had experienced violence, and I'm not saying asking why, as in I don't think it's a good thing, but that it's almost heroic to be able to go to the police. Because when you talk to women and some of them girls, and they tell you what they experienced and the barriers that they went through, I would ask myself, could I do this if this was me? And often I really just did not know if I could do it. These women are incredible. When there are fewer barriers to justice, right? One can kind of see how it's less difficult. I mean, it's always difficult after being victimized, but it's less difficult if one is in a supportive system. Whereas if one is in a criminal justice system that is not supportive, it just makes everything so much more harder. And so encountering women who have interacted with this system and insisted on having their abusers held accountable. I mean, it's just amazing to hear their stories. And I have written in my nonfiction, I've written about this in my academic work, and I've published about some of these interviews that I've done with women.
Well, thank you for giving those women a voice. That's just really important work. Do you think you'll write another novel?
I have written another novel, yes. All of these books were in, I think it was just a coincidence that everything came out in 2020. It took me 10 years to do the research and to write this book. And His Only Wife, I began thinking about it when I was also writing my dissertation, but I didn't begin seriously writing until late 2012, late 2013. So about 7/8 years, but somehow both of them happened to come out in the same year. And I think that creates the impression that I was able to do so much in 2020. But I mean, these are books that have been in the works or in progress for about a decade now. A lot of my writing happens in my head. So I often begin thinking about novels like years before I write them. It was the case with His Only Wife. And so this novel that I'm completing now, I'm basically editing now, I began thinking about and like plotting and writing in my head whilst I was writing His Only Wife. And I'm constantly thinking I'm currently thinking about the third novel as I finish up this one. So I have like a backlog of stories in my head, and I just need to find the time to put them all on paper.
Can you tell us what the novel's about?
Yes, so this is a novel about friendship. I'm very interested in how friendships change over time, and I'm very interested in how, two people can experience the same thing and then come to very different realizations or conclusions about an event. So it's a story that follows it's also set in Ho, and I should say I partly grew up in Ho, so it's a place that's close to my heart, and I think that's why I keep setting my books there. But it's two young women who spend part of their lives in Ho, and they're very good friends. They're from the same family, but more than being relatives, they're very good friends. And over time, there's a rift develops in this relationship. What the book really does is try to explore this rift, what exactly happened, how it happened, and we get to hear from two. So it's like both of them are narrators, and we get to hear each person's side of the story, telling us why this relationship disintegrated.
Is there anything else you can think of I haven't asked you about?
This has been a very good, very stimulating conversation. You've asked excellent questions.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it a lot, and I've really enjoyed your book, His Only Wife.
Thank you for having me.